Hello everybody. If we haven't met, my name is Rebecca Fensom. I am the Student Wellbeing Advisor here in the Downing College Student Wellbeing team. So I'm really excited to share with you this workshop today, CBT skills for everyday wellbeing. So let me first of all explain what it is that we're going to be covering in today's recording. So I'm going to be explaining first of all what CBT is, how it is that you can use it for your everyday well-being. I'll be explaining what some of those techniques are and how they can be helpful to you, and how also CBT can be really helpful for those behaviour changes as well. So before we start, just a very quick reminder that this workshop, it doesn't replace or substitute counselling or therapy. This is not a group therapeutic exercise. It's just using those CBT skills for your everyday well-being. Now, if you are coming to this because you would like some CBT, you would like some counselling, or by the end of this you think actually this would be really helpful for me to have more input, then come and have a chat with us in the wellbeing team. We will signpost you to appropriate services, give you some guidance about where you can access that, because you have options in terms of what the NHS provides and also with the UCS, the University Counselling Service. And also only engage as much as you feel safe to, feel able to be able to hold and contain. Sometimes when we are looking at our thought processes, our emotional well-being, it can feel quite difficult. So only do as much as you feel comfortable to. And if anything is triggered or anything is raised after watching this recording, then please do come and have a chat with us. You can book with our health practitioners on Moodle, or you can book with myself via email. So what we're going to be doing as we go through, there is a workbook that accompanies this recording as well that you should be able to find linked in the description of this video. So I will give you the prompts of when to pause the recording so that you can then complete the workbook. CBT is very much homework based. There's things to do to help you change those thinking patterns, which will make more sense as we go through. But just to say, if you don't want to download the workbook, if you don't want to do that, you don't have to. You can still very much learn a lot by watching this recording, but just so that that resource is there available for you as well. So cognitive behavioural therapy, this is what CBT stands for. So the basic premise is understanding how much our thoughts influence our emotions, our behaviours, our actions, and then how that kind of goes in a loop. So what CBT tries to do is it tries to get into that first link in the chain to really examine and identify what that thought is and how that thought can then influence us, because sometimes we can act without really understanding what it is that has motivated that emotion and that action. So cognitive behavioural therapy really kind of rewinds to look at that initial thought, and then has activities and techniques to really explore those thoughts that we have. So this is the cognitive model within cognitive behavioural therapy. It's sometimes known as ABCs, as well. But this shows the loop really that can happen. So say you have a thought of, I have so much work to do. And then this can create a feeling of feeling really overwhelmed and unmotivated. And then that feeling then influences your behavior, where maybe you procrastinate, you put it off because you're so overwhelmed and so unmotivated because it all feels too big. And then that behavior then leads into the thought, thinking, oh my gosh, I've got so much work to do, because you've procrastinated, because you felt overwhelmed and unmotivated, because you had that initial thought that you have so much work to do. So what this model hopefully shows very clearly is how our thoughts really do have power. Sometimes there is that famous thing, oh, it's all just in your head. Well, not really. Our thoughts really can impact the way that we see the world, the way that we behave. So if we can work with that first point, with that thought, then it can really influence that emotional and behavioural reaction that we have. So let's use that CBT model to really understand how we respond to certain situations. And this is what CBT does, is that you might have a situation um, that has created some emotions and some behaviors and some thoughts for you. So what it does is it really narrows it down to have a look. So just to explain each different bit very clearly, so we're all on the same page. So a situation, that's anything that happens in your life and it triggers this cognitive triangle. Your thoughts are your interpretations of that situation. So there's an example here. If a stranger looks at you with a bit of an angry expression, one thought could be, well, what have I done? What have I done wrong here? Or another thought could be, oh, they're having a bad day. What's going on with them? And then that emotion that can then be triggered through that thought. So you could feel a bit ambivalent if you think, well, they're having a bad day. You could be feeling worried, if you're thinking, oh gosh, what have I done wrong? And then your behavior is your response to that situation that the emotions and the thoughts have created. So maybe it is that you become quite aggressive person. Well, why are you looking at me? What are you looking at me like that for? Or you might go home and you might then ruminate and think, oh my gosh, what did I do to upset that person? So it can have all of these different knock-on effects from that situation and how we've interpreted it. So I've got another example here, okay, and what I'd really encourage you to do is to have a little look at that workbook. So the first thing that you want to look at, the worksheet on there, is your cognitive triangle. Okay, so we're going to map this out. So think of a situation in your life. So I've got an example here. So two of your friends share on social media a gig that they went to, and it just so happens it was your favorite band. Okay, so what are your thoughts about this situation? You might have a thought, well, why didn't they invite me? They know that's my favorite band. Why did they go and not invite me? Like, have I upset them? What's going on there? And then that creates the emotion. So you think, well, I'm quite upset that they didn't invite me. I'm really worried, if I've upset them, I feel a bit lonely. I feel a bit isolated. They live close together and I'm here, at uni. They've just forgotten about me. And then the behaviors, that might happen then. So you might then distance yourself a little bit from them, which then only exacerbates that isolation. You might not, then speak to them to find out what was happening. So you're just going off your own story of what you think that the situation was rather than the facts of the situation. And then the next time you might go to a gig and you might not invite them, which then only leads more to that isolation and that separation and that bad feeling between you and your friends. So we can see how that triangle becomes that self-fulfilling prophecy. You're feeling upset and left out. So you do have emotions and behaviors that make you feel even more upset and left out, if that makes sense. So if you want to have a little pause of the video now and have a look at that first bit of the workbook, it's labeled your cognitive triangle. Okay, so hopefully that's helpful to see how your own thoughts, so really personalizing it to you, how they can influence your emotional and behavioral responses. So what CBT does is it really brings a lot of awareness to our thoughts, because sometimes we are not always really fully aware of what we're thinking, which I know might sound a bit odd, but sometimes we do have those automatic thoughts, okay, in that we automatically think something without really rationalizing it and really understanding why we might be having that thought. And what CBT does is it develops skills for alternative thinking. So rather than having these automatic thoughts, it helps us to see a different side to the picture. And also that understanding that having cognitive flexibility, so not having those automatic thinking, being able to see multiple sides to a story, is really beneficial, to our well-being. So one thing that CBT is really helpful at helping us understand is those common thinking errors that we have, okay? So these are those common thinking patterns, distortions, those automatic thoughts that we can all have. So just to really emphasize that we all have these, okay? And it's very normal to have these. So don't look at the next slide and just think, oh my gosh, I have all of them. Like, oh, there's something really wrong with me. What we have to understand is if we leave these common thinking areas unchecked, it means we can really limit ourselves. We can really damage our relationships, like with that example we've seen with the friends not inviting us to the gig. And it can really make us experience low mood and anxiety as well. So here's a little list of some of the common thinking areas. Okay, so I'll just read through these and explain them a little bit. So we've got the magnification or minimization, so exaggerating or minimizing events. So an example is that you kind of downplay your achievements. Say you got a really good mark, on a bit of work that you did, and you're like, oh, it's nothing, it's fine, it's fine. Or if you make a mistake, it becomes the biggest thing in the world, and you're like, oh my God, I made this big mistake. Like, this is really, really terrible. So overgeneralizations is another common thinking area. So broad interpretations from one event. So an example could be you went for an interview, you were really, really nervous. So now you say to people, I'm always nervous in interviews. You were nervous in one interview, all right? Not all of them. It doesn't mean you're always then going to be nervous. So magical thinking, just because you thought something, you made it true. So this can be really upsetting, actually. Sometimes when you wish something bad, happens, and then it does. So say you're really cross with someone, you're like, oh, I hope something really bad happens to you, and then they, maybe fall down and like hurt their ankle, and you're like, oh my God, I thought that. So I must have brought that into reality. That's kind of magical thinking. Personalization. So you are responsible for events out of your control. So in terms of, this is often seen in like other people's reactions to things and other people's emotions. So we as children can just want our parents to be happy, right? And we think, oh, if only I was more successful, if only I had done that thing, if only I hadn't missed their phone call, I would have made my parents more happy. We can't influence someone else's emotions in that way. If that's up to them how they feel. Okay, so jump into conclusions. So despite little or no evidence, you interpret a situation with certainty. Okay, so for example, I'm ill now, so I'm going to be ill for the rest of the term. That doesn't necessarily mean that you are. Okay, just because you're ill now doesn't mean that you're never going to feel well, ever again. Should statements. These are very, very common. So the belief that things should always be a certain way. So for example, I should always get the highest grade or I've failed. If I don't get a first from Cambridge, then I've completely failed. And it's those kind of should statements that can be really, really damaging. So disqualifying the positive, so only focusing on the negative. So say you do a bit of work, you get 10 pieces of really positive feedback and one that's a bit negative. You'll find yourself ruminating, going over and over again, that one negative, and it's almost like the positive gets a bit discounted. Again, this is a really, really common thinking error that we all have. But again, left unchecked, it can be quite damaging, to us. Okay, so an example here. So Jen receives a criticism in their recent essay. So she thinks, I can't do anything right. I'm never going to do it well. So common thinking errors, that this is, we've got magnification there. Let me just go back. Oh, it's not letting me go back. Hold on. So magnification that we've got there is kind of over exaggerating the event. Overgeneralization. So, she's never going to do well ever. And then the jump into conclusions, that we've got there, interpreting a situation with certainty. Okay. So if she thinks that I can't do anything right, I'm never going to do anything well, she's magnifying, she's overgeneralized, she's jumping to conclusions. So you could say, well, that's just a thought, but we know that our thoughts don't really impact us. So this could make Jen feel really low in her mood. It can make her feel really anxious. The behavior that this can then lead to is she could really overwork, because she thinks, well, I'm going to make sure I never get that criticism ever again. Or it could make her procrastinate, because she wants to avoid having that criticism again. So she avoids the situation where she might get it. So she'll be putting off that work for as long as she possibly can. It could really impact her confidence, that she really doesn't believe that she can do things. And then it can really impact her motivation as well. So we can see, how these common thinking errors can really impact, on us, in that way. So are common thinking errors, okay? I think it's really helpful to have a good understanding of what our common thinking errors are, okay? So you can have a little look in the workbook. There's a worksheet there about thinking errors. So what I would say is only approach those thoughts you feel able to approach. We're not sharing this as a recording, but if you add any comments, please remember it's a confidential space. But also, so don't share anything that you wouldn't want anybody to be able to see. So really have a little look at those thinking errors that you think you have. So it might be in relation to a situation with friends, it might be with yourself. A common thinking error that I often have sometimes is if I get ill at the start of term, that is often when I think, well, this is it now. I'm just going to have an on-off cold, until it becomes spring again, and that is that real jump into conclusions. So have a little look at your thinking errors, what you think they might be. If you want to take a little pause on the video and have a little go at that worksheet. Okay, so if you've had a little look at that worksheet, I hope that's been helpful to really understand what those common thinking errors are and how it can really impact you. Because hopefully that's becoming really clear for the CBT model, is how our thoughts really impact our emotions and our behaviours. So what the techniques do is really go at looking at that initial thought, that first link in the chain of how we can challenge that. So I'm going to be talking you through some of those CBT techniques now to really challenge those thoughts. So the first one that we're going to have a look at is a thoughts on trial. I find this one really beneficial. It's really good at understanding what is a thought and what is a fact, because sometimes we confuse the two. We think just because we think something, it means that it's true. And what we do here with this exercise is we're really, putting that thought on trial. Is it actually true or is it just a thought? So the thought here, okay, is I've put an example, like I have a bad mark on my essay, so I'm likely to fail this year. So what is the evidence for that? Well, you've got a bad mark now. If you don't improve, this might mean that you could fail. But the evidence against is, well, one bad mark doesn't mean I'm going to fail everything. I am clever. I can learn quickly. I've received bad marks before, and it has never meant that I've failed. Okay, so we've got the evidence for, we've got the evidence against. The final judgment is going to be, well, one bad mark does not lead to failure. This is the catastrophizing thinking error. Okay, so hopefully that's explained how to do this. So again, there is the worksheet in the little workbook where you can do this for yourself. So think of those common thoughts that you might have, or think of a thought that you've had, very recently. Put it on trial. What is the evidence for it? What's the evidence against it? Just to really help you understand how just because you think something, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's true. Okay, so if you want to take another pause of the recording and have a go at that exercise there. Okay, so hopefully that was helpful for you. I find the thoughts on trial one honestly one of the most helpful exercises, and it's one that I often go back to really help me understand when I can get myself in those common thinking error loops that we can very easily get ourselves into. And the next one is Socratic questioning. So this is a way to challenge your thinking processes again, to really help you understand what is actually true here. what is it that's true? What are the facts of the situation? And so again, it can be really good at stopping that first loop in the chain, stopping that spiral, of thoughts that we have. Um, so what I will suggest you do there is another two worksheets that you can have in the workbook around this. So one is titled Socratic Questioning, and another is Doing the Work. So have a little pause and have a little go at those worksheets and see how you get on. It's a really helpful approach to guide you in understanding what is actually true with your thoughts. Okay. So again, hopefully that was helpful to you to have a little explore, to adopt that Socratic questioning approach to your thoughts. The next thing that we're going to look at, we're kind of taking another step down, looking a little bit deeper into why we have those thoughts in the first place. And this is often due to the core beliefs that we hold about ourselves. And these then can directly influence our thinking processes, our feelings, our behavior. So, for an example, if you have a core belief of I am not good enough, then this can lead us to really overworking all of the time to try and prove that you are good enough. Okay. Or it could, lead to those emotions of really low self-esteem, and really lacking in confidence because you never feel quite good enough. You never feel as though you quite fit in as you should do. But what's really important to understand is that core beliefs are learned. Okay, they are often very long-standing. This is why they're core beliefs. They're core, in terms of our personality, but they can be changed. So the first step is finding out what they are. So there is a activity, again, a worksheet in the workbook, which is really going to help you understand what your core beliefs are and how it is that they're influencing you. So again, what I would really say with this, tread very carefully, only look at what you feel able to look at. If it feels too difficult to go that deep, then just take a little pause. You don't have to do everything straight away. But just maybe, over the next few days, just start to notice, what is it? If I was just to gently sweep away, like a gentle archaeologist, sweeping away the dust and the dirt, what would it be there underneath? What's driving a lot of these thoughts, a lot of these behaviors, a lot of these emotions? Because it's often those core beliefs that are really motivating that. Okay. So if you want to take a pause and go and do the worksheet and then come back when you're ready. Okay, so now what we're going to move on to is how we can use cognitive behavioural therapy techniques to develop more positive behaviours. Because what can happen with our thinking patterns is that we can very easily develop a negative bias where we see everything as kind of negative, and it can really diminish or limit our positive experiences. If we see everything in black and white, it can sometimes be helpful to challenge those automatic thoughts, so we're really understanding, okay, well, I think today has been absolutely awful. Has it been absolutely awful? Has some good things, happened as well? That common thinking area where we disqualify the positive. It can be really helpful at challenging those. So I've got a couple of activities in the workbook that are really, really helpful for doing this. So this can be especially good if you experience a lot of anxiety or low mood. A good versus bad log at the end of the day, it can be really helpful, so you can see really factually, rather than just what you're thinking, you can see really factually what has been good in the day and what has been bad. Because more often than not, when we actually really sit and think about it, yeah, bad stuff might have happened, but if we really try hard, we can find some good stuff as well. So at the end of the day, you just need to list out the good things that have happened and the bad things that have happened. So this can just help rebalance, and not everything is bad. We're going to probably have at least one thing on that list, even if it is, I had a nice cup of tea. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't need to be a huge thing. But what it does, it helps to reprogram the mind as well. When we start to notice more of the positive, it means that our brain starts to look out for it a little bit more as well. So it means we become better at spotting the positive things. And it encourages us to do more of those things as well. So when we see it in black and white, we think, oh yeah, I really like seeing my friend. Maybe I should try and see them a little bit more. Or actually, I really liked, having a walk, in the grounds today, or going for a walk by the river. Maybe I should do more of that as well. So it can really help us to do more of those things that make us feel good when we see it in black and white. So you can take a little pause of the video now and have a little go at this. You can do it, for this day so far, or you might want to do this at the end of the day as well. Okay. So just moving on now to the final activity. So this is a pleasant events diary. So sometimes what can happen with these thinking patterns that we have, we can talk ourselves out of doing those things that actually make us feel good. So if we go back to that example of where the friends went to a gig of your favourite band and they didn't invite you, if we go around on that loop, we come more and more away from our friends, don't we? We start to feel annoyed of them. We don't invite them to something, else, or we then don't talk to them. But actually, if we can keep a pleasant events diary, it can help us really see the benefits of planning those pleasant events. So, we could maybe plan, in that situation with the friends, that we contact them, and say, why didn't you invite me? Like, I would have really liked to have gone to that, what was going on? Or reach out to them, say, oh, I see you went to that gig. I really like that band. They're playing again then. Do you want to come again? Or there's a band that's quite similar. Do you fancy going to that gig, with me? And what it does is it helps us see with the pleasant events diary that sometimes before we do something, we don't necessarily want to do it. Sometimes you think, oh, I just can't really be bothered, like, to go out, or I'm a bit tired, or I don't really know a lot of people there, like, I don't want to do awkward small talk. So before I go to that, I'm probably feeling like a 3 out of 10. And then we go to it, and actually we do have quite a good time. We know some people there, we can chat to some new people, and we have, a good laugh and fun with them. And then we come back, and the next day actually we're not that tired. So even though I kind of felt a 3 about going, afterwards I kind of feel more of like a 7. It was quite nice. So what it then does is, again, it just helps to retrain the brain, so we start to do more things that make us feel happy. Because the issue is when we are stuck in those common thinking areas, when we're stuck in that little loop of that thought influencing our feelings and then our behavior, we can get caught in this negative spiral. So our thoughts can then really entrap us. But we can use CBT techniques to help us understand and help us learn more about what are those things that actually do make us happy. What is it that makes us feel really good? What is it that makes us feel more positive, about things? Okay, so that's the final exercise in the workbook if you want to go and explore that, and that is also the end of this recording as well. So hopefully that's just giving you a little bit of an idea about how CBT approaches work, how it can really support your everyday well-being. So really having an awareness of how our thoughts can influence our feelings and our behaviors. So if we can get to that first link in the chain, if we can really examine our thoughts, bring some awareness to them, and start to learn, well, just because I think something, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's true, then we can hopefully break that chain of having those really difficult emotions, having that behavior that then is, caused by that. It kind of stops that whole loop. If we can bring some awareness to the thinking mind, we can stop acting on that autopilot all of the time, and we can start to have a little bit more control of our thoughts, a little bit more awareness. So then we can have more choice about how we respond rather than just react. Okay. I hope that's helpful. If you have any more questions, or if after doing this you think it would be really helpful to have some CBT, then please do come and have a chat with us in the Wellbeing team. We will be more than happy to help you explore how you can find that. All right, thank you very much for watching.